Okay, we're going to be recording this meeting originally designed to talk about Bob with Bob Buege on his book Eddie Mathews and the National Pastime. Due to technical problems, Bob cannot log in. We decided to stick around. We're all together. Let's talk about Eddie Mathews and Bob Buege. And so, unfortunately, Bob's not here to defend himself, or he doesn't need defending. So let's talk about that some. And go ahead with, we had a comment started just before I started recording. So if you could do that, I appreciate it.
Well, I'll just say this again, not my whole history with Wisconsin, but how that this book got handed from one really good baseball fan to another and ended up in my lap with the comment that it was one of the best baseball books these two baseball fans had ever read. And I started reading it and finished it. And it was a wonderful book. It was not just Eddie Mathews, who just seemed like a really real person. He didn't beat his own drum. He was in a way sort of modest about what he'd done. And, I think that at the end of the day, with Mathews and Aaron, they're two great baseball players who are sort of underrated because they just went about their business. But the book is just really candid. It's from the heart, and that is not just the individual it's written about. It's got to be the author too, who was able to get that out of him and transcribe it and put it into words. And you can read that and understand that not all that is Eddie Mathews quotes, that it is the organization and the writing is just beautiful. And as I said, it starts out with a kicker. I was born during Prohibition. I've spent the rest of my life catching up. And I'll let Harry Rothgerber, who is my predecessor, who was head of the Pee Wee Reese chapter for some 20 years and has kind of kept us going, and probably is our Bob. Harry's our Bob. And I'll let him say a few words about Bob for posterity.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat everything I said before, much to Bob's chagrin, since it was very laudatory. But I did mention how I first met Bob in December of 2000, and in the back room at Derry Haggerty's Pub while we were starting to plan the 2001 SABR convention in Milwaukee. And Bob quickly became one of my favorite people, and that was a great convention in 2001. Actually, I remember the local group enticed a panel of all-American girls professional baseball players to come. I think there were about 6 of the ladies on the panel. And during one interesting moment when they were talking about the movie A League of Their Own, several got in a slight argument over who Madonna was modeled after. One said, "I was, Madonna was me," and the other one said, "No, Madonna was me." So I thought that was very cool. Later on in 2010, when my traveling baseball buddies and I came up to Milwaukee, Bob met us and showed us around the Miller Park, and was an outstanding gentleman and host in representing Milwaukee to us. So that was very cool to see Bob up there. And I remember Bob telling us about how he, the first time he met Mathews, there was a very early morning session 6 or 7 a.m. and Mathews pulled out a bottle of alcohol. I want to say it was bourbon, but then again, I'm in bourbon country, so I'm not sure. But Bob said that Mathews said that when the bottle's empty, the interview's over, and it was empty by noon. Bob remains one of my favorite SABR people of all time. That's all I know right now. My voice is wearing out real bad.
Yeah. Harry, there's 3 of us on here. I think Tom and Rick and I are part of the group that became the Milwaukee committee who put it on, and we used Derry's Pub the entire time. It was like we couldn't meet anywhere but Derry's. So, and it was Bob who somehow convinced SABR to have a convention in a city without a chapter. And he said, no, I'll get people. And just through the old newsletter we got in the mail, about 20 of us showed up, and we had such a good time working together. We said afterwards, we should probably form a chapter now that we've done all this work. And Bob was really responsible for that. And I think he was president for 3 days, a very short time. Bob doesn't like being in that position. But he's still kind of the heart of our chapter. I consider him our guru. When you talk about researchers, you talk about writers, we always talk to Bob and some of the things Bob has done. And I think many of us have learned from him. So
I certainly remember you, Dennis, and some of the others who are Zooming with us tonight. And, y'all did a great job at getting, getting Bud Selly to be the keynote speaker, and the games were good, and Johnny Logan, Mantilla, Pafko. Although I'm a big Dodger fan, and all I can recall about Eddie Pafko is him being at that wall watching the Bobby Thompson home run sail over his head.
Yeah.
Might also mention that at that Milwaukee convention, that's when I met several of you. Rick, particularly, I remember. And by the way, as Rick told me, he sent me a private text. We are well dressed tonight, Rick and I, with these green shirts on. But
thanks for not coordinating
I
with the
wanted
rest
to mention it, but it bears mentioning that I remember Bob was the editor of the booklet too, Baseball in the Badger State, that was distributed at that convention. And I know Rick did a lot of things with that the whole meeting too. But
so I have a question about it's really the how Milwaukee looks back at the Milwaukee Braves, because that is such a strange phenomenon in baseball, to have a completely failing team in Boston. I think they had less than 300,000 in attendance, and moved to Milwaukee, and then for 5, 6, 7 years lead in attendance and win the World Series and go back to the World Series, and then drop off so quickly after that. And a book that I don't know what people think about it, but I enjoyed it, is a book called Bushville Wins. Has everybody read that? Is that considered an accurate book?
There's a SABR publication. I don't have it. I don't think. I don't know why.
It's a wonderful book. It actually was published. It was not SABR by author John Klima. I think it's Klima, and it's a wonderful story about how everything built up to the World Series, and it was pretty sudden that after that and Eddie Mathews talks about the fact that Fred Miller died in a plane crash is contributing to the demise of the Braves in Milwaukee.
Yeah, life is a series of near misses, and what would have been if Fred Miller didn't go on that hunting trip.
Yeah.
But there's a great book by Patrick Steele. He's a professor at Concordia here in the Milwaukee area. He wrote a book. Does anybody remember that is a Hail to the Braves? Or I forget the name of the book.
I got it right here.
It's fantastic, and it explains all the different reasons why the Braves were set up to kind of fail and leave. It was mostly media money. They were literally going to double their media money moving from Milwaukee to Atlanta. That alone, and then the Common Council was the county board was kind of price gouging them on rent and everything for County Stadium. But I highly recommend reading the book, and then you understand why they left. But it was really unfortunate. They let this group outside of Milwaukee, the Chicago group, they should have sold to Milwaukee owners.
Yeah.
Is that the group that was the guy that owned the Palmer House that
Bill Bartholomew's group? Yeah. It was basically based in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, the name of the book was Home of the Braves, The Battle for Baseball in Milwaukee. Yeah.
Excellent book.
And one of the things that they did, and the county did this, but the Braves got blamed for it, is only in Milwaukee were you allowed to bring your beverages in. So people would bring their own beer in. And if you brought a group in, group could be 4 people, you'd buy an extra ticket to put your case of beer on the seat. And the county stopped that. And of course, the Braves got blamed for it. Maybe the Braves were part of the decision, but it was done by the county. And that turned so many people off too, that, the idea that we can't bring our own beer into the ballpark. Can you imagine bringing your own beer in today's sports world?
It's crazy. But the county reversed themselves, but I think it was too late. And then, but I don't think it was just that. I think in the 50s, it was television. A lot of, even the Yankees weren't drawing well. A lot of teams weren't drawing well.
Yeah.
And Milwaukee actually was drawing. They really kind of held their own. It wasn't attendance. It was mostly the media money and greed.
I looked every year at attendance, and really the Atlanta Braves started dipping down in the numbers that the Milwaukee Braves had. So it was, it was like they gave up too quickly.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bob Buege does the forward on Patrick's book too. So I just noticed that. When the Braves moved to Atlanta, then in 68 and 69, the White Sox played each team in the American League one time there. And I've done some writing and researching on that. And I think almost every one of those games, when they had a Braves game in Milwaukee compared to a game in Atlanta, the Milwaukee attendance outdid the Atlanta attendance. They didn't start out well down there. They didn't have a good team, and they struggled. And
I think it's pretty obvious that Milwaukee is a baseball town.
Can I just say?
Yeah.
I wanted to add something here. There's a really good book about the Braves and their departure and the whole political and economical reasons for that departure, called Sad Riddance. It was written by Chuck Hildebrand, and it's a long book, but it really gets into a lot of detail about the reasons why the Braves left and basically the backroom deals that were done regarding that. Chuck Hildebrand was a nice man who just passed away about maybe 2 years ago. Moved here out of California, was a newspaper man in the San Francisco area, and got to know him a little bit. He was a big UWM fan. Went to all their baseball games. But if you haven't seen that book, it's called Sad Riddance. I think it's still available. It's probably about 700 pages, but it's worth reading.
Wow, it's big for a baseball book. To talk a little about Bob as a person, Tom, you worked with Bob as a teacher for a million years, and Rick, you were one of his students, weren't you? So there are different perspectives there.
Bob has been my best friend for about 60 years. We actually know about 55 years. We started teaching together and at Pulaski High School and I taught for 33 years and retired a little before he did. But we both taught English. He was my department chair in the later years and was a very good and of course you could imagine he was a very organized department chair and very fair with everything he did. We actually found out the first day we taught together at a meeting in the library, we were looking at each other wondering, geez, this guy looks awfully familiar. And we found out we were actually in a class together. The 1 year that he went to UW-Whitewater, which is where I graduated from, he was there for a year and we were in the same class together. So we've known each other for a long, long time. Went to a lot of ball games together, played a lot of golf together, played a lot of sheep's head together. But great guy. And we go out to breakfast a couple times a month, and with one or two other guys that we taught with, and enjoy talking baseball almost every morning when we do that.
For those of you outside Wisconsin, sheep's head is a card game. Played with 32 cards. Why use the whole deck when you only need 32? It's a German card game. I think it's originated. It's a passion in Wisconsin. Everybody in Wisconsin plays that, and the rest of the world thinks we're crazy. So, yeah.
And Tom, don't forget you both coach sports too.
Right. I coached baseball for actually 51 years. I just retired a couple years ago. Coached high school baseball, but Bob was a volleyball coach. A very successful volleyball coach at Pulaski with girls volleyball, and really built that program into something. I coached baseball and cross country, and so we were both involved in sports all the time, basically. And we both there was a recreation program that ran every night at the school, and neither one of us could survive solely on a teacher's salary. So we wound up working at night in the building. There were 4 nights a week when the rec department was going. He worked 2 of the nights, I worked the other 2. And so we earned a little extra money that way.
I mean,
Rick, you had him you had him for class, didn't you, Rick?
I never had either you or Bob for class. In spite of it, I still became a good writer thanks to Bob still working with me.
Yeah, and I've written 4 books about baseball myself, and I know Bob has looked at him, I'm sure, and he's never graded him for me, but I'm sure he'd have something to say about him if he did.
You got an exemption.
Tom?
Remember the exemptions you could get for certain grades at Pulaski?
Right.
So you got an exemption because you were.
Tom, what have you written?
All my books have been basically about coaching the game. I did edit a book that was written by Derek Johnson, who's used to be the Brewers pitching coach. Now he's the Reds pitching coach. He wrote a book on pitching, and I edited that as well. So, but all my books have been about the trade, basically.
Yeah, wonderful.
I'm always a little nervous.
The Brewers have got to have you all excited this season. They well ahead in Central Division. My team is the Cardinals, and they flailed, and they're in last place. Who would have thought? But Brewers a good team, and that manager Craig Counsell is considered one of the best managers in baseball. Hope they keep him.
I think he wants to leave. I'm not sure he wants to coach. I think he wants to spend time with family and kids. That's one of the words that we're hearing, but it's hard to say.
Although there's word about him maybe going to the New York Mets.
Yeah.
Since Stearns is there now. So,
by the way, we do see Counsell's son. He plays for the Gophers now.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a junior.
We're after a world championship in Milwaukee. We'll let him go to New York. High hopes. High hopes.
Yeah, I'm always a little nervous sending Bob emails because I'm afraid he's grading my writing. And when I sent him the one on this, and I always spelled Eddie Mathews' name wrong. I spelled it with 2 T's because I thought 1 T was wrong. I can never remember which way it is. So Bob in his email back said, by the way, Mathews is spelled with 1 T. Damn. Yeah. So, yeah.
When Eddie came to town to promote the book, Eddie Mathews, of course, I grew up, Eddie Mathews was my favorite player, and I used his bat, even though it was too heavy for me, you know, the old story. Everybody has those kind of stories. But I convinced our principal, for 27 years, I was the advisor for the school's yearbook and newspaper. So I convinced our principal I had to go down there and interview him and do a story on Mathews and Bob Buege. And so he gave me the afternoon off. And just the day before, I really wanted to meet Mathews. I never met him, and I wanted to have some converse with him a little bit. The day before I did this, a friend of mine, Tom House, who was a pitching coach, he was the guy who caught Henry Aaron's, was it 715th home run?
55th.
Yeah, 15th.
Right.
715.
He's the guy in the bullpen that caught the ball. Well, anyway, we were good friends. And unfortunately, now he's suffering from Parkinson's disease. But we were talking, and I mentioned to him that I was going to see Eddie Mathews the next day, and I knew he played for Mathews with the Braves when Mathews managed the 1 year. It was only 1 year, I believe, that he managed. And he said, "Well, don't mention my name because we didn't get along very well." So, of course, the next day I wanted to mention his name to Eddie, and we were talking about it. And I mentioned the fact that I talked with Tom House, and he looked at me with this kind of ugly look on his face. So that son of a. And that was about. He didn't go any further than that, and I didn't push it after that either. So, little story about Mathews, anyway.
Yeah, Eddie was obviously Bob's favorite ball player, although he didn't write it like his favorite ball player because he was very factual. But I always say I've known Bob since 2001, right at the convention, and he's had white hair as long as I've known him. And so I actually got to see him with dark hair. He was at Game 4 of the '57 World Series, and who sells the videos out there? Doak
Ewing.
Yeah, Doak Ewing. So he had a video of Game 4 of the '57 World Series, and he was at the game sitting in the bleachers, kind of high up in the bleachers, and his dad said, "Okay, this game's almost over. I want to get out of here soon so we can beat the traffic." So they came down to the front, standing right by the stairway so they get the hell out of the ballpark. And Eddie hit his home run right there. And Bob's in the picture. He's a little 12-year-old kid with dark hair. I just thought at 12 years old he had white hair also, but Bob's in the picture there. And so.
Well, Mathews, he really was highly underrated, and he puts in his book, and everybody knows he still is maybe the second best third baseman of all time if you put Mike Schmidt first. And the fact that he took 5 years to get into the Hall of Fame just kind of underscores the fact that for some reason he was just not recognized for how great he was, and that until he hurt his shoulder, and if he hadn't, had about 50 or 60 more home runs, he was dominant. I mean, there was nobody like him. The book just captures all that, and you feel like you'd like to read the notes because there's a lot of stuff that he did not have time to tell or didn't have the pages to tell, but it's just a great baseball story. And I know I looked at his obituary, and Eddie Mathews fell off a boat and got his hip crushed and was never well again and died, at 69 years old, very young. I'm sure alcohol was part of that kind of did him in. And I did note that he and Norm Cash shared first base duties in his last year with Tigers, and Norm Cash was sort of the same way, and he ended up slipping off a dock and hitting his head and dying. It's all that said, he does make alcohol sound a lot of fun.
Now, one of the reasons why you might think that Mathews, or people might think that Mathews is underrated, is he had his best year rather early in his career, about 1953. And so I think people expected even more of him than what he did produce. So he's not that underrated because, as you said, until Mike Schmidt came along, he was probably the best third baseman of all time.
Folks, Bob is back in. He's muted, but he signed back in. He's now not muted. Bob, can you hear us? Can we hear you? Okay, well, we're not hearing you.
Well, I just wanted to give a shout out to Stu. Stu, I was happy to see that the annual conference is scheduled for Minneapolis next summer, and I've already plotted my drive up there, and it is up through Milwaukee. I think I've got a game schedule we're going to go to, so we'll be in Wisconsin on the way to Minnesota, and so we'll be asking for the best bar in Milwaukee, and maybe see some of you folks when we go through.
Yeah, let us know when you're coming up. Bob, I don't know if you can hear us. I know we aren't hearing you yet. We've been on talking about Eddie Mathews and you and baseball and stuff. So we did start recording it in the middle, so you'll be able to hear this later. If you want to call back and participate, if you can hear us, if there's things you want said, you could call me back, and I'd be glad to transfer your comments. So if you want to do that as well.
Ryan just put something in the chat that, about Eddie Mathews and Ron Santo were slow getting to the Hall of Fame and should have been. So I was wondering why the media didn't particularly care for Eddie Mathews and Ron Santo. And also third basemen are underrepresented in the Hall anyway. But anyway, do any of you have thoughts on the media and Eddie Mathews?
There's a book by a guy named Jay Jaffe called the Cooperstown Case Book, and he has a whole chapter dedicated to why third basemen were overlooked. And part of it, I think, is that Pie Traynor was put into the Hall of Fame, and he doesn't deserve to be, according to Jaffe. But yeah, his chapter about third baseman starts with Ron Santo and how Ron Santo just was, as Eddie Mathews' career ended, Ron Santo's really picked up, and he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. And I think he wasn't put in until after he died.
Right.
And so, yeah, third basemen for whatever reason have been underrepresented. It's just a strange phenomenon, but writings like Jay Jaffe, I think people will sort of correct that, as Scott Rowland got in recently, and Nolan Arenado, and there's a few others coming.
Bill James did it years ago when he wrote that Ron Santo was one of the best third basemen ever. They all can't be Mike Schmidt. And yeah, now that they can apply statistics to it.
Most.
Yeah.
I believe Joe Posnanski in his book, Baseball 100, addressed that issue. And I'm trying to remember now what he said about Mathews, but I know he was really of the opinion that High Trainer didn't begin to compare to Eddie Mathews or some other third baseman. And maybe somebody can help me with that recollection of why, other than maybe Mathews didn't cater to the writers as much or something. But I remember it was really I did not, until I read Posnanski's book there, the chapter on Eddie Mathews, I didn't realize it had been such a long road for him to get into the Hall of Fame.
Hey,
Yeah,
Bob,
Just ridiculous.
hang on 1 second, guys. Bob, if you can hear me, you want to call back, give me a call. Hopefully you can hear me. Give me a call and maybe answer a little about why it took Eddie so long, or what Eddie thought. Maybe you could add something to that. Let's see if Bob calls, if he's hearing this. Continue. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Eddie Mathews was no BS, so he wouldn't kiss up to the media or anything. And, Ron Santa was the same way. And,
Yeah.
but the thing is, Eddie Mathews is so humble, it's not like he was a jerk, I don't know. I don't get it.
I do believe, I don't have a copy of the book with me, but it's only about a 5-page chapter, but I know Joe Posnanski did address that, and
he did. I don't know if you go by Francis or Frank.
Francis or anything else that's not obscene.
Bob, are you hearing us okay?
Okay. Francis, yes, he talked about Eddie Mathews' long way.
I can hear you.
And the fact that he was such a great ball player. He spent a little time, Posnanski did. I kind of checked up on all those things in preparation for this, and you're on the money with that. He talked about how Eddie Mathews just sort of sat there and waited. And I'm in the book in Ben's book, it is it seems like he's kind of back and forth with the press. There was an instance where he got a DUI or something, and somebody in the press kind of hounded him and made a big deal out of it, and he was not happy with that. But I also recall that there was he mentioned that he bought drinks for everybody in the press a few times. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the face of it, it's, I think we'd all agree it's ridiculous that he had to wait so long.
Yeah. The other thing about Eddie Mathews that, there's an aspect to him where he comes off as sort of a redneck. And he's not from the South really, but he just comes up as, a fighter and a drinker. But he had immense respect and love for Hank Aaron. And it seems like that was returned. Of course, you'd have to read the Hank Aaron books, but those two guys really respected each other throughout their careers.
Yeah. I've got Bob on the line, folks. So, Bob, Francis made the comment asking why it took so long. What do you think was the reason?
He said the reason was that the writers didn't like him. Nothing more than that. He was a tough person to get to interview, and their way of retaliating was to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. It took him 10 years of waiting, and he had statistics very similar to Ernie Banks. Banks got in 5 years. So Eddie always kind of resented that. But it's interesting what I've been listening to here. Aside from the stuff about me, something that was very interesting. And
Can you guys hear
I
this?
think Eddie changed the game in a way that Tad might have mentioned this early, but he made third base a hard-hitting position. So before him, most of the third basemen were like Billy Cox and these little wiry, fiery guys. And when Eddie came up, it was all different, of course. He was not a great fielder for a couple of years, but Billy Georges worked with him and he became a good baseman. Yeah, as people have alluded to it, he was I was a little bit hesitant, I guess, when I first started interviewing him in his house. And I thought, well, I better be careful what I say here. It turned out I didn't have to be at all careful. He was just an open book. And his beverage of choice was bourbon, Old Crow bourbon, which he bought by the gallon. He always kept a gallon jug of that stuff in his refrigerator. And so we did this interview, and the longest we ever sat without getting up at all was probably 3 hours. But it just went on and on and on. And he'd get up every once in a while and go get his, fill up his glass. And he'd always say the same thing, Bob, you want one? No, I didn't. I wasn't going to try and drink with the major leaguers. But he was very easy to interview. He had a reputation, and it somewhat deserved, of being a tough interview. But if he trusted you, he'd tell you anything. And we just hit it off as soon as I got there. And I spent 3 days there just interviewing him and recording. I had about 20 hours of cassette tape that I came home with. And then just a matter of organizing it and putting it into some semblance of paragraphs and sentences. And he was great to work with, just a real pleasure. One thing that helped was his fourth wife was there. And she would often join him on his early morning jaunts to Duke's Cardiff office. Cardiff by the Sea is about, 7 miles or something from where he lived, which was actually in San Diego, but the address is Del Mar. But Eddie would often be there when they opened at 6 in the morning. And he had this group of barflies that he spent time with nearly every day. But he gave me a tour of the area. He drove me around. And it crossed my mind that maybe I shouldn't be writing with somebody who drinks constantly. But really, he was not a problem drinker. He didn't get drunk. He stayed drunk. He stayed just at a functional level. And he didn't start drinking until he was 17 years old. He was with the High Toms in North Carolina, and they would take cars to the games, the road games. So these were not station wagons or anything. They were just good-sized cars, and they didn't carry many extras. So it was very hot the whole season. So when they were done playing baseball, they had to get something to drink. So they would head for the parking lot, open up the trunk, and then they would pass the time. They knew that Eddie was only 17 years old, but that's not a stumbling block in any way. So he started out, as I said, playing for the High Toms. He hit 32 home runs in about 3/4 of a season. And the next year he moved up to the team at the BB level, and he started hitting home runs to places that no one had ever seen. The most famous one, of course, is the home run into the Magnolia tree, which is still there, by the way. And Dennis, you went and saw, right?
When we were at the Atlanta convention, we had to go see the tree. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're doing here in Atlanta. It's not well kept. A lot of refuse lying around there, but there is a marker indicating the significance of that home run. The ballpark that they played in, Ponce de Leon Park, was strange in, well, a couple of ways, but the main one was that there was no outfield fence in the right center field area. So the home run that he hit into the Magnolia hit the tree on a fly. He was the first one to do that, and the only person that hit it previously was Babe Ruth, and he had done it on a bounce. So Eddie immediately became the next Babe Ruth as far as the writers were concerned, and I think that was probably to his detriment. But everybody wanted to see him hit, and he could hit. He improved his fielding. He had a strong arm, and he was probably the MVP. Should have been in '53, but having Mathews come to Milwaukee was a big part of their image that they built up of being a really exciting franchise, which is why they were able to set the attendance record in their first year in Milwaukee. What else can I tell you? Is there anything you would like me to talk about? Or?
Bob, Tim Perkins has got a question. Hey, Bob, what was the Braves clubhouse like in 1957? And what was Mathews like as a teammate?
I think he was respected by everyone on his team. He was the enforcer. If somebody had been knocked down by an inside pitch, the person that they would have to deal with was Eddie Mathews. He would, if the Reds, it's the first time that I remember reading about it, that he walked from his position at third toward the mound, and as he got near the mound, he would yell to the pitcher, if he comes after you, he's got to get to me first. And he said he'd take care of him, and he did. He wasn't a huge person, but he was a tough guy. And he was, I would have to say he was the most popular Milwaukee Brave. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And everybody wanted to know Eddie and meet Eddie. He had his problems. See, after a night visiting with Bob Buege and his wife, Eddie was driving home, and he went through a stop sign, and immediately there was a siren or some indication that there was a policeman behind him. So he turned off his headlights and went down a side street, and he had just gotten to the place where he was going to park his car, and the officer stepped out of his car and made the arrest. Give you an idea what the criminal justice system was like then compared to now. First of all, he wouldn't be charged with anything today, but he received the ticket probably 10 o'clock at night, and the next morning at 8 o'clock he was in court. Imagine that. And he wasn't sure how to handle it, but he got a letter of reassurance from Fred Miller. He had two letters that he received in his lifetime that he was really proud of. And one was from Fred Miller, basically telling him not to worry about what people were saying about him being a drunk or any of that. He said, just play the way you are playing, you're doing great. The other one was a letter from Ty Cobb, and he played a game at the end of his first season in the professional ranks, so to speak, and he met Ty Cobb. Cobb said in the letter that he had only seen three players with a swing like his. I don't even know who the other two are because he didn't say. What else can I tell you?
How was your relationship with Eddie after the book?
Well, we weren't bosom buddies or anything. We didn't move in the same circles, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But he was cordial. I describe it that way. He, if I called him, he'd answer the phone. Never showed any irritation at being disturbed by the telephone. But I think it was very good, a good relationship. When I first met him, I had written most of my first book, which was the Milwaukee Braves, a baseball eulogy, and I wanted Eddie's name on the cover of the book, so I wanted him to write the foreword, and he didn't really know what that was, but I said I met him at a card show. I stood in line, paid my $2. It was pretty cheap back then. And he sat at the table, and I approached him and gave him my little tip for the $2 or whatever. And Ray Nitschke was also there that day signing. I didn't ask for his autograph. But I told Eddie that I had a business proposition in mind. I said, do you have an agent or somebody that work through it? He said, no, just me. So I said, well, if you'll give me your address, I'll send you my proposition in writing. And so he wrote his name and address on this big envelope and gave it to me, and I mailed him a suggestion and a cassette tape. So I gave him some, things that I could put into a forward. So I gave him a cassette, he listened to it, and he just jotted down a couple of notes. And so then, of course, I wrote the start of it. And so his name ended up on the cover where I wanted it. And I saw him, several years after that at a card show, different place this time, State Fair Park. And I reintroduced myself, and he seemed to remember me, but I wouldn't bet on it. And I said, have you ever thought about writing your memoirs? And he laughed. The world isn't ready for that. So I said, well, if you ever decide that you're ready, let me know. I'd like to work with you on your autobiography. And he said, yeah, we'll see. And about a month later, I got a call at home, and it was Judy Mathews. She dialed for him. And so what he said was, let's do it. That was it. That was the man of few words. And so we started, and I as soon as school ended for the school year, I flew out to California and rented a car and got to his house successfully. And we started doing the interview almost immediately. And we did that for 3 days. We took a couple of breaks in there, of course. We went to a really interesting kind of a Caribbean style restaurant in San Diego. And they were known for their fish tacos. They're still one of the best things I ever tasted. They're excellent. And we went a couple other places. He drove me around Torrey Pines, showed me the golf course and the forest. And we went down to La Jolla, and he showed me the beach. So So he was willing to do anything. He told me, if you want to do something in particular, just let me know. So I did a couple of times, but mostly it was work. I mean, I was thoroughly prepared. I had pages and pages of notes, and I also had a head full of facts that I had gathered, and then we just talked. One of the things that happened, we were sitting in his little breakfast nook, and that's where we did the recording. And he happened to mention that the old Heartland statues that they sold in the 50s and 60s, they had contacted him about doing another round of these things. So Spahn and some of the others were asked to do this. They received almost nothing in terms of money, $50 or something. And I said, "Did you ever get one of those statues?" He said, "Yeah, I just got them not too long ago. 4 of them." I said, "Can I see one?" He said, "Well, yeah, if you help me find it." He said, I threw them in the garbage. I said, "Garbage? I'd like to have the thing, you know." So he and I went out to his backyard and dumped out the garbage can and found one. So I don't know what happened to the others.
Wow.
But that was one of my rare souvenirs. I've never been a collector, really.
Yeah.
But I still have that one. And the best part of it, of course, is the image of me and Eddie rooting through his garbage. Let's see, he told me how much his house had sold for. He told me about his Mexican gardener who was in the country illegally at that time. I mean, he would tell me anything, some of which he volunteered and the others I volunteered, but very open, very casual about things. He still followed baseball at that time, but he was not that impressed with it, the multi-million-dollar contracts and all that. And he said, don't think I didn't want to have that same kind of money, but he said, I think we had enough fun in those days that it made up for the lack of money. He was very self-effacing. He said, let me see if I can get what he said. This was, he was talking about the Hall of Fame, I guess, and we got over onto related subjects. And he said he knew his place in the history of baseball. He said, I know what kind of player I was. And he said, I was a good player, but I wasn't the greatest player on our team even. He said, Hank Aaron is on our team, so I couldn't possibly be the best. He said, I wasn't even the best in the bar. Lawrence Bond was with us. So he put himself at a certain level of skill as a player. Very honest about it.
Bob, I got some questions here. Ryan asked, what did Eddie think of Hank Aaron? I think you answered that question very nicely. Thank you. So, yeah.
Yeah, answered it very well.
Yeah.
They used to play cards before the games. They used to play casino. I don't know how to play it, but he did. And he and Hank would play it in the locker room before they went out to start the game. And a couple times they had to hold up the first pitch a little bit while Hank and Eddie finished their game of casino. And then finally, I think Dresden was the manager then, and he put an end to that. Took away their cards.
Wow. Dave Clements got a question here. When you interviewed Eddie, Was there a topic or two that he delighted in talking about?
Well, I think he enjoyed all of it. I mean, he felt he had a place in baseball history, and I think he did.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, he was not the best player in the league or on the team or in the bar.
And then Tad has a question. At the end of your book, Bob, Mathews seems unapologetic about the drinking. Soto goes on about it and discusses his love of bars and drinking with buddies. His caveat is that he mentioned it cost him his manager position and several marriages. Did you choose to end with that? How do you think he felt about the cost versus the benefits?
Well, he insisted that he wouldn't change anything if he had the opportunity to live differently. He said everybody has a certain way of life and he said, I was happy with the people at Dukes. And I guess he was. He said, what am I going to do after a ball game? When I was still playing, we'd go to Ray Jackson's. So he and the three close buddies, Buell, Burdette, and Spahn, they went along with Eddie to Ray Jackson's. Ray Jackson's had a room upstairs that would be private, away from the fans. And the downstairs one, the fans could mingle with the ball players. So that was how Ray Jackson got money under these guys. They didn't really pay for anything. But he said, well, what am I going to do at the end of the game? I get done at, let's say it's 11 at night. Am I going to go to the Christian Science reading room? And he wouldn't, obviously.
Let's see, Chris Betch here has a question. The marker for the magnolia tree at Pontedalian Park disappeared for a while. It was found later. It had been removed by a construction crew, but it was found. I think it's just sitting in the storage now. Ooh, we should find where that is, Bob, and steal it. Bob wants to, Tad wants to go to the magnolia tree to find the fountain of youth. Let's see, Frank.
Yeah. The fact that there was no fence in right center. When you got just beyond where the fence could have been, there was a railroad embankment.
Yeah.
And there were 3 different levels of signs. And the writers would rank the home runs by how many levels of signs. So somebody said, oh, he hit 4 something today, whatever. Anyway, I think he liked Atlanta. I think he enjoyed playing there.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't in favor of the Braves moving. But years before that, when he was in the minor leagues, I think he enjoyed it. What else?
Yeah. Francis has a question. What did Mathews have to say about the managers of the Braves?
Well, he didn't have a lot of good things to say about them.
Oh.
He didn't really say much in public that would seem super critical of him. I think the one that he disliked the most, he along with most of the team, was Chuck Dressen. Dressen just had personalities that rubbed people the wrong way. And so he liked Haney, but he thought Haney got crazy in his old age and started playing a different style of ball. He had Mathews bunt a couple of times, but it didn't take too many bunts on Eddie's behalf to realize that wasn't going to work out.
He didn't like Bobby Bragan.
Yeah, I was surprised that he didn't like Bragan. I think that's fair to say, but he wasn't as critical of him as he was certainly of Dressen. And he liked Bertie Tebbets, even though he was only there for a relatively short time. But he said he used to drink those stickers. No, I can't even say it. Stingers. He used to drink Stingers. Now, I don't even know what that is, what combination of alcohols, but he judged people somewhat by how much they drank. And he thought, for that reason, that Tebbets was okay. Interesting way to...
Yeah.
That made it into your book, Bob. He said something like, Bernie loves those Stingers. Boy, could he said, God, could he drink those Stingers?
It sounds like
right.
Those guys were
Spoke very highly of Billy Martin. He worked for Billy Martin. It must have been at Oakland. So long after he was retired from the playing field, he worked for Billy Martin, and Martin was a great guy as far as Eddie was concerned.
Well, yeah. Tad had a couple of questions here. One of them I got one in between with Ryan also. Did you hear any of Harry Rothberger's comments?
I did.
Did.
I think all of them. I think I heard the whole thing.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, I remember when Harry came up with these two other guys, as I recall it, and we looked at the Milwaukee Braves monument, which at that time was in the concourse of the stadium, not outside where it is now. There was a kind of a summary sentence on one of these plaques, and it said that Mathews and Aaron were the all-time tandem leaders in home runs. And I remember Harry didn't believe that. He said, aren't you forgetting a couple guys named Gehrig and Ruth? And of course, it was correct. They had two more home runs than Ruth and Gehrig did. Harry must have looked it up when he got back to Louisville. But we had a good time. Rick was there part of the time, maybe most of the time. Yeah. And I think Rick was the one that told them about Summerfest. They had never heard of it, and they were quite taken by the idea. So they went there, and Harry said later, just had a terrific time. So Milwaukee's an exciting place. Then and now.
Yeah, before we started recording, Harry was mentioning that he came to Milwaukee, and you guys were meeting at Derry's with the committee to bring the meeting to Milwaukee, the convention to Milwaukee. And is that how you first got to know Harry?
I first got to know him in 1997 when Louisville hosted the convention. Harry was either the committee chairman or co-chairman or something. He was high up. And one of the things, he went to our meeting and he thought everything sounded great, but the idea of paying the ball players to come to the convention just rubbed him the wrong way. He didn't think they should have to pay these guys. Well, I had seen enough of the SABR conventions that the only way to make sure they're going to be there is if you pay them. So we paid him $250. It's not exactly big time, and we more than made up for it other areas of the convention. I think we're probably still we raised more money for SABR than anybody any other convention. So we had a good group, and not a large group, but a very good group.
We had a good leader, and none of us wanted to let you down because you had this vision of the convention that we all believed in, and so we didn't want it to fail, and we didn't want it to fail because you worked so hard on it. So that was part of it, Bob.
There had to be a better reason than that.
Oh, well, we all wanted to do well, but we
Yeah.
as I don't know, before you were on, we were talking, Tad mentioned that Harry had been the president of the chapter down there for 20 years. And he said, he's like your Bob Buege, the people behind where this chapter's got going, and a lot of the basic foundation of the chapter was founded through, and I've always considered you that foundation that got us started, and I've always appreciated that. So,
Well, we had a good group, like
Yeah.
I said.
Yeah.
Everybody filled their little role. And,
Yeah.
That was the last convention that Bob Davis ever attended.
Yeah.
He was there,
Oh.
I think, 2 days, and then he had a heart problem and went home
Ooh,
and died not too long after that.
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
John Borey's commenting, he said that he was with Harry on that trip, can reiterate what a good host Bob was. Yeah, I could see Bob being the good host. He's
Well,
yeah. You like to show off Milwaukee. I understand that very well. Tad's come back and got another interesting question, a little different. Who is Bob's favorite player today?
what is today? Thursday.
The Brewers are up 4-1. If that helps with the decision today. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. I don't know if I have a favorite player today. I certainly did when I was a kid. Everybody in Milwaukee loved Eddie Mathews. I don't think I've met very many people that didn't list him first. And Eddie hit a home run on July 5th, 1953. It was the first major league game I ever saw. County Stadium was only a couple months old. And Johnny Logan hit the first home run I saw. It was a cheap hit off the foul pole. But later in the game, Eddie hit one that the newspaper said was 472 feet. And that impressed me. Anybody that could hit that far impressed me. So historically, that would be my favorite. There were some. I met Warren Spahn a few times, and I don't know. I didn't care for his attitude. So I'm subject to my whims, and there's a lot of really interesting players now. The game has changed so much, but I don't know if I could pick one.
I can understand when I read the question, I'm thinking, boy, if I was asked that, who would I say? I'm not sure I'd say offhand that I have one.
Yeah.
Let's throw it back at Tad. Yeah, let's throw it back at Tad. He asked the question. Let's put the pressure back on him. So, Tad, who's your favorite player today?
It's Adam Wainwright.
Oh, thanks. He got us good.
Sorry about that, but he won his 200th game the other night. He did not pitch over 90 miles an hour. He shut out. The Brewers are going to win the pennant, so he didn't really hurt the Brewers. But what a performance! It's everybody thinks you got to throw the ball 98 miles an hour to be a good pitcher, and they all tear their arms up. And I still think there's room for the Greg Maddux and the Adam Wainwright guys who have finesse and curveballs and good accuracy, and he kind of rose to the occasion.
Yeah, he was throwing 72-mile-an-hour curveballs. They didn't have a pro. They just whiffed at all of them. It sounded like, and the Brewer announcers were my God, another 72-mile-an-hour curveball. It was that was kind of fun. So, and he was, afterwards he was a very class act, thanking the Brewers and telling they're very class, for being there, and and a lot of the players, I understand the Brewers stayed in the dugout for his speech afterwards. It's that was nice to hear. They were respecting a competitor.
Yeah, it is nice.
The thing about Wainwright and Maddox, people like that, is you wonder whether they get a second look these days if they came up.
Exactly.
So hard.
Yeah.
By the way, I think Francis attended his first convention in Milwaukee. Is that right, Francis?
No, actually, I attended the one in Chicago in 1986. I joined SABR in 1983, and I went to my first one was in Chicago in 1986, and then outside Washington and Crystal City in 1987. Then with my kids growing up, I wasn't able to come to another one until the one in Louisville that Harry was involved with. And then the Kansas City one in the late 90s, in 98, I believe. And then Milwaukee was actually my fifth.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it
Milwaukee
was very memorable. And
Milwaukee was my first, but I lived there. It was pretty easy to be.
Yeah.
You know.
But you did, I agree with what everybody said. All of you did a wonderful job.
Hey, if it counts for anything, my first convention was Milwaukee, but 1983.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many of you were involved in that one, but
University, right?
yeah, it was quite memorable. And the player panel, Fabian Gaffke was such a good Minneapolis Millers player, and getting to meet him. And then they had Double Duty Radcliffe, Lester Lockett. I was surprised you mentioned that, Bob, that you did pay players to come on the panel in 2001.
Well, Harry didn't think we should do it. But
well, how many others? I mean, we're planning now, and we're hoping. I've said I don't even want to. It's getting players is pulling teeth, and again, the same thing. If you don't commit with money, you don't get a commitment. And at our chapter meetings, our conventions, and it is likely going to be the Hall of Fame weekend for the Twins. So they bring in their Twins Hall of Famers, and the Twins have kind of pledged to help with that. But also that was when the thought was that we were going to have our first day with the panel at Target Field. So I'm kind of leaving that more to Scott, but we didn't have the option in 2012 when we had the convention of, I didn't even ask about paying, but really if $250 at least commits a person to getting there. And even if it's not huge bucks for some of these guys, but I think it's with what they spend on conventions. If you spend $1,500 to get commitments from players, I think that's a good thing.
yeah, the thing that concerned me was what happened in New York in 1991. You were at that one, right?
No, I wasn't.
No. Huh. Well,
In 1991, okay.
They had a really interesting panel scheduled. Three ball players from quite a ways back, and one that had recently retired. And I don't remember specifically what their names were because they didn't show up.
Yeah.
There was supposed to be 4 guys at the panel, and there were none. And there was another panel. They were going to replace what could have been 3 or 4 guys with Joe Pepitone. And the New York people thought, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Pepitone never showed up.
You know, in 1988, our first convention, and
New York, or if it's, I don't know. I thought it was very disrespectful of the rest of SABR. And
yeah,
I guess they could have because Larry Ritter was there. That was
well, that's what. In 1988 in Minneapolis, we were on the phone. I think the panel was on Friday night, and we were on the payphones trying to dig up a few more. And we did have Julio Becerra and then Nancy Mudge, who had played. But it was your Milwaukee guy who was the total hit of that convention. And Norm Mock had lined that up and I think picked up Joe Hauser and Sheboygan. And so Joe was there for the convention, and I mean, that was
Concert.
for me really, really something to even hang out with him a little bit. I think he put the moves on my mom, who's at the convention too. But Joe was a hit, you know, and I mean, he was a Milwaukee guy because I think he grew up in Milwaukee and then played, and then after his career, and he managed in Sheboygan and settled there. But yeah, it's you know, our 2012 our player panel, it was okay, but there was no real stars on it.
Yeah.
Stu, you don't think you can get Cott and Oliva?
Well, we in 2012, I wanted Cott to be the keynote speaker, but they don't pay, but they would fly him and his wife in first class. And you know, he just said no, which is fine. It's kind of a big commitment. And Oliva was really part of the deal was that we had a rainout against Kansas City earlier in the year, and they put it on that Saturday when we were having the player panel, day game. We had the player panel in the morning, and Oliva would get in uniform and work out with the team. And he just, I don't know, even from before that, he was just kind of, and he's come to our chapter meeting. He really didn't seem like he wanted to do it. And the Twins said, hey, they would not get in there and say, hey, Tony, can you do this? But they said, well, we'll let Tony go from his pregame duties with the Twins to do this. Others were great. Roy Smalley, because he does TV. And I said, is this going to affect you? He says, I'll just tell him I can't do that TV game, the day game. But then his daughter ends up in the hospital and they're there until 3 a.m. And, you know, Roy Smalley's a great guy, and that's a very good excuse. But the night before, Tim Laudner said, what time you want me there tomorrow? And because he hadn't committed before. So we had Frank Quillisi, was awesome as a master of ceremony. Laudner showed up, talked, and got to the ballpark. Bob Rocky Johnson, who's really quite a pretty good, interesting player. And we got Bill Davis. You know, we were kind of, in fact, I was embarrassed to call Bill Davis because it was so late in the game. I didn't call him early until we were having trouble. That's, I don't know, it's just pulling teeth to get players, but maybe we've just got to finally say we've got to have a budget for that. Yeah. And because then if they agree to take the money, at our chapter meetings, we've also had things just where people didn't make it and show up when we were expecting them. And it's tougher now.
Yeah, one of the complaints in Chicago was there weren't any player panels, but that was one of the challenges I think that they were having too. But Mike Veck made up for a lot of that because he was very good.
Well, so. Guillen too. I wasn't there last year, but Guillen too. But looking at in Houston, they got Clemens. They had another good panel with players, and yeah, so we'll see what happens. But I'm more and more the SABR office is doing this more and more, and I'm happy to kind of sit back and let Scott earn his salary by doing a lot of that.
Yeah, we're losing people quick, and we did say we were going to give away an autographed Eddie Mathews autographed copy of the book that I have. I have to have 3 copies of that book, Bob. I don't know why I know I bought one for my dad. Yeah, I know. And so I have one that was autographed. I don't like autographed books because I know someday my kids are going to see my books and take them to Goodwill, and there's going to be an Eddie Mathews book with value there. And so I got a Willie Mays, you know. So I'm more than willing to donate that to the people who attended. So Bob, if you would pick a number between 1 and 14, and I'll make sure they're still here. A number between 1 and 14. We'll see who wins the book.
11.
Let me make sure we got it. Oh, I know Ryan Sears up here in the top of my picture. Ryan? Sure.
All right.
Wow. Ryan, you come to all these. You've never won.
Way to go, Ryan.
That's great, Ryan.
I thought for sure we'd get someone who wasn't here yet. So, yeah.
Can Bob sign the book for me before you send it off?
If I can get it to him, yeah. Well, Bob, Tom had to leave. He said, sorry, gang, I have to leave. It's been an interesting evening. Thanks, Bob. Breakfast soon. So if you guys set something up for breakfast, let me know. And then I'll bring the book along.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
And well, gee, now, well, Ryan, let's see, Ryan also.
With my signature. I'm filling it.
Yeah, are you okay with that, Ryan?
Am I okay with what?
Yeah.
Am I okay with what? I'm not understanding.
Well, if an Eddie Mathews book signed with just Eddie on it, not Eddie and Bob, the value drops. I don't know, author's signatures.
Well, I think it actually, I actually wanted to drop because I'm not intending on listing on eBay anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah, and see, I want to keep my copy signed by you, Bob. So yeah, Ryan has on here. Harry always been very careful with money. He and Henry Lee and Bud Diamond were 3 chairs in '97. Pee Wee attended. After he died, we renamed ourselves in honor of him. So yeah, he's our chapter is very careful with money because our treasury has been around $200 for just about ever. I think we're 250. I think we're $256 right now. That may be the high point in the last 10 years.
Can you lend us some money? We'll pay Vig. Anyway, it's nice seeing everybody.
Yes, thank you for doing this.
My second favorite state, and I hope maybe we can do something like this again. And when I come up there next summer, which I will, I'll shout out ahead of time and hope to see some of you.
Yeah, we'll put something together. I like that. Thank you, everybody,
for doing this.
Yeah, well, thank you for your patience, and thank you for putting up with the challenges that we had. It's been a wonderful night. And some people bailed out early, and that's unfortunate because it was very interesting. So, but thank you, everybody. Most important, thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I'm sorry we had the glitch. I don't know.
Yeah.
We worked around it, I mean, we thrived in spite of it.
Yeah. So
yeah, you did well, I think.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Get a bunch of us together and give us a chance to talk about baseball. It's we can figure that part out. So yeah.
Yeah. True.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis and Bob.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Francis.
Yep. Yep. I think Francis is gone. Yep. He's gone. Yep. So,
Okay.
Bob.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for all this. You all do
Well,
a lot.
when you say it means extra special for me. So thank you, Bob. So you guys arrange up breakfast. Even if I don't bring the book, I'd love to get together with you guys. So.
Okay, take care, everybody.
You too. I know. Hey, Dave, how are you? I think you're muted. I'm not hearing you.
Yep. How are you doing? Anyway, I just want to compliment you on the newsletter that you all send out, because I've looked at other newsletters from other chapters, and yours compares favorably with any of them. So you should be proud of that. I know I am.
Well, so, I appreciate that. This one was a little late, and so there's some things I wanted to do in it, but here's you can see I'm moving, so. And I was starting to put bookshelves together, and if I grab a book out of that one, this whole shelf will fall. So before I finished, I bought restraints to hold it to the wall. Never thought I'd have to do that. So really, what most of my office looks like is all my books.
I see.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for your tremendous effort of being president and putting out that newsletter. It's great.
I always appreciate you. You always make sure to say thank you. It's special.
Okay,
So-
well, I'll see you the next time. And glad
Yeah.
that you've moved back. I'll see you in person sometime.
Yep. No, we're not going anywhere. So we'll be here.
Good night.
Take care. Bye now.